Okay, so have you ever really stopped to think about how scientists study our minds? I mean, how can you possibly measure something as personal and invisible as a thought? It kind of seems impossible, right? You can't put a memory on a scale or a feeling under a microscope. Well, today we're going to crack open the toolkit of cognitive psychology and show you exactly how they do it. Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? We can't see it, we can't touch it. So how do we get from just kind of musing about the mind to collecting real hard scientific data? This is the central puzzle that psychologists have been working on for decades, and we're going to tackle it right now. And the answer, the key to the whole thing, is the scientific approach. You know, a lot of people think psychology is just about interesting ideas or theories, but it's not. It's a real science, built on solid evidence, rigorous testing, and super systematic observation. It's this process that lets researchers take something totally abstract, like, say, attention, and figure out a way to actually measure and analyze it. But here's the thing, and this is super important for understanding everything that follows. At the heart of all of this is a constant balancing act. It's a trade-off. On one hand, you've got the super controlled, pristine environment of a lab. And on the other hand, you have the messy, chaotic, but completely authentic real world. This tug of war between control and realism, that is the central challenge in studying the mind. All right, so let's start on one side of that balancing act. We're going to step inside the lab, where the number one goal is figuring out cause and effect. So a lab experiment is really all about one thing: control. A scientist will tweak just one specific thing. That's what we call the independent variable. Let's say they change how much sleep someone gets. Then they measure the effect on something else, the dependent variable, like maybe their score on a memory test. And here's the key. By keeping everything else exactly the same, they can be pretty darn sure that the change in sleep is what caused the change in memory. And the whole process is really methodical. You start with a hypothesis, which is just a fancy word for a testable prediction. Then you design the experiment. You tweak that one variable. You measure what happens. And if you've managed to control everything else, boom, you can draw a conclusion about cause and effect. It's a really powerful way to build knowledge, step by step. But here's the catch. The double-edged sword of the lab experiment. Its greatest strength, all that control, is also its biggest weakness. See, that level of control is amazing for figuring out cause and effect. It also means other scientists can repeat the experiment exactly. But it also creates a super artificial environment. I mean, think about it. Remembering a list of random words in a dead silent lab is totally different from trying to remember your grocery list while your kids are screaming in the background, right? So, if the lab is too clean, too sterile, what's the alternative? Well, you guessed it. We got to head out into the wild and see how people's minds work in their natural, everyday world. And this brings us to a really, really important idea called ecological validity. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. All it means is asking, do our findings actually apply to real life? Can we generalize what we found in the lab to the real world? It was a concept really pushed by a psychologist named Ulrich Neisser, and it was a major challenge to the idea that the only true science happens in a sterile lab. And this comparison right here really nails that trade-off we were talking about. With a lab experiment, you're all about high control, which means you can pinpoint cause and effect, but your ecological validity, your real-world relevance, is pretty low. On the flip side, with something like naturalistic observation, just watching people in their natural habitat, so to speak, you have almost no control. But what you see is authentic. It's real. So you can see the real goal here isn't about picking a side. It's not lab versus real world. The best, most powerful science happens when we can somehow get the best of both worlds, when we can bring that laboratory precision to questions that have real-world relevance. Okay, another really important tool for getting those real-world insights is the case study. Think of it this way. Instead of looking at a huge group of people with a wide-angle lens, a case study is like taking a powerful magnifying glass to one single person or one group or one specific event. And this is absolutely crucial for studying really rare things that you could never, ever create in a lab. And believe me, some of these case studies have completely changed the game. You've got Phineas Gage, the railroad worker who had a massive iron rod shoot through his brain in a freak accident back in 1848. He survived, but his personality was totally different, which gave us our first real clue that the frontal lobe was linked to who we are. Then there's the famous and tragic case of Henry Molaison, or HM. After surgery to treat epilepsy, he couldn't form any new memories. Studying him for decades revolutionized everything we thought we knew about how memory works. These deep dives have literally shaped the field. Okay, so we've talked about observing behavior from the outside. But what if We could actually peek inside the skull and watch the brain as it's working. Well, that's not science fiction anymore. That's where psychobiological tools come in. The core idea here is pretty straightforward. Every single thought you have, every emotion you feel, it's all tied to a biological event in your brain. So psychobiological research is all about connecting the mind's software, our thoughts and feelings, to the brain's hardware, the actual neurons firing, and the physical systems working. And this table shows two of the biggest tools in that toolkit, EEG and fMRI. Here's a super simple way to think about them. EEG is like a high-speed stopwatch. It has amazing temporal resolution, so it tells you exactly when something happens in the brain, right down to the millisecond. fMRI, on the other hand, is like a GPS. It has incredible spatial resolution, so it tells you where in the brain something is happening. One tells you when, the other tells you where. They're both incredibly useful, just for different things. You know, with all this high-tech gear, it's easy to forget one of the most direct methods of all. Just ask someone. Seriously. Things like surveys, questionnaires, and interviews, what we call self-report measures, are all about getting that first-person perspective. It gives us a window into someone's inner world that, honestly, no brain scan can ever fully capture. Of course, this approach has its own issues. For one, people might not always be totally honest. They might say what they think you want to hear, and honestly, sometimes we don't even know why we think or feel a certain way. We're just not that self-aware. But even with those limitations, if you want to understand things like someone's beliefs or attitudes, you pretty much have to ask them. It's a vital tool. You just have to use it wisely. So we've got all these different tools in our toolkit. How do we put them all together to get the best picture of the mind? And maybe the most important question of all, how do we make sure that all this research is done in a way that's safe and ethical? The truth is, no single method is perfect. Each one has blind spots. We already said it. Lab experiments can be artificial. Case studies don't apply to everyone. That's why the best research today almost always combines methods. A scientist might use an fMRI to see where a memory is forming, an EEG to see the precise timing of when the brain reacts, and a behavioral test to see how it all affects performance. It's about layering the evidence to get a much more complete picture. And holding all of this up, the absolute bedrock of every single study is a powerful ethical compass. These principles you see here, they are not suggestions, they're rules. They exist to make sure that our quest for knowledge never, ever comes at the expense of the safety, the dignity, and the well-being of the human beings who make the research possible. And the cornerstone, the absolute heart of ethical research, is informed consent. And listen, this is way more than just signing a piece of paper. It's a whole process. It means that participants know exactly what they're getting into, they agree to it freely without any pressure, and they know that they can walk away at any time, for any reason, no questions asked. And how do we make sure this all actually happens? Well, before a single person is recruited for a study, 100% of that research, every last bit of it, has to be reviewed and approved by an ethics committee or an institutional review board. 100%. There are zero exceptions. Period. So there you have it. We have this incredible, ever-growing toolkit that's letting us ask deeper and more complex questions about the mind than ever before. Our ability to peek inside our own heads is just getting better and better. So that leaves me with one final question for you. What's the biggest mystery about the human mind that you think we should use these tools to solve next?